In this video, we're going to take a look at how the anchor system works. An anchor is a way to set a target channel in one layer in order to reference that channel data in another layer. So to show you what I mean, let's come over here to our layer stack, and I'm going to create a new standard layer. And this is going to be, I'm just going to call this actually, let's just call it text. We're going to add a piece of text here. All right, so on this layer, I have just my brush selected. Let's come over here to our material, and I have just my height channel enabled, and I'm going to set this all the way to a value of 1 just to start. All right, so next, let's come over here to our alpha, and let's choose a new alpha. So I'm just going to scroll through the alpha, and in here we have a couple text alphas. So here we have this one, and it's getting cut off here by the screen captures. So it's called Font Chathura. So I'm going to use this guy here. Now, here in the text field, I can type anything. So actually, I'm just going to type algorithmic. And so here we see our text. Now, you can see also that it's getting cut off. So I'm just going to decrease the size. And now we can see the full text within our brush. And then I can just simply resize the brush like this. All right, so we're going to use this brush, and I'm just going to stamp down this text. So now I have this text here. Actually, I think that's a bit too large. So let's just scale this down here, and then I'll increase the size of my font. Maybe just a little bit on the decrease. Okay, so I'm going to use this. And yeah, once again, I'm going to come into here, and I'm just going to stamp down this text. All right, so now I have some text here. Now, another thing I'd like to do is just kind of blur this text a bit, and I can do that by just adding a blur filter. So next I'll come in and I'm going to add a filter, and here I'm going to choose blur. And so this is giving me a bit more of that kind of molded effect, but it is a little intense. So I'm just going to drop the value of this blur intensity down here. So like I said, now we're starting to add some of these details. We haven't baked this, or this detail wasn't part of the mesh that we baked or anything. So if I take a look at my channel, so I'm hitting C on the keyboard, I'm going to go right into my ambient occlusion. You can see that, well, this isn't being considered in this ambient occlusion. Well, we have a filter for that. So here with the layer selected, I'm going to go under Add Filter. And here under the filters, I'll scroll down, and I'm going to add this HBAO filter, which stands for Horizon-Based Ambient Occlusion. So I'm going to add this, and now we start to see something happening here. You can see the channel source is set to height. So it's generating this ambient occlusion based off the height data that we just painted. Now here I can start to decrease this height depth, and I can play around here with this blur radius like this here. So now that I have this, I'll hit M on the keyboard to go back to my material mode. And again, I'm just going to kind of play around with this radius and this height depth to get what I need here. So let me try something like that. Now this blur is kind of starting to get in the way, so what I'm going to do is just reorganize this. So I'm going to take the blur, left click, and drag and drop that above the horizon-based ambient occlusion. Now I'm getting more of the result that I want. So here we have just a bit of an order of operations to consider. Let's go back to this horizon-based ambient occlusion, and let's drop that radius down just a little bit. Now, of course, if this is still too intense, which I think it is, we can always go into the layer. Let's target that ambient occlusion information, and then simply just drop that opacity back. So I'm just going to do something like this just to kind of feather that in. All right, so now we have our text in place that we've added here. Again, even if the height is a bit intense, which I think it might be, let's go into our height and then just simply lower that intensity here. So maybe something more like this. I'll set a value of 65 here. Okay, so now we've painted in this detail. However, this new detail, it's not being affected by any of our rust. And so that is where we can use anchors. We can anchor this effect that we have here in this text, and then we can use that somewhere else in our layer stack. In our case, we're going to use it directly here in our generator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right-click this layer, and then here I'm going to choose to create an anchor point. And you can see that here down at the very bottom of the right-click menu. Add anchor point. And so you can see this is called text. Now right now for this anchor point here in the properties, you can see that here's the name. I can change that, but it's underneath references. It's saying, well, no references found. And that's because we haven't created a reference just yet. Now, one of the rules about using anchor points is that whatever's referenced by this anchor, it needs to be above it. Because if you recall, the layer stack is always going to process from the bottom up. So we just need to make sure that whatever layer we've anchored, it's below what we actually want to reference. In our case, we've created the text below our rust. Now, let's jump in here into our rust, and let's come over here to the mask, and let's take a look at some of these generators that we have. So for example, we have this mgdirt generator, which is helping to produce parts of the mask that are in these occluded areas. And this is going to help us here with our text piece. So with this generator selected, I'm just going to scroll down here towards the bottom, and you can see that I have this micro height and micro normal. Now in my case, I've painted height information, so I'm going to click the micro height button. It's going to open up my mini shelf. We have this tab here called anchor points. So I'll click the anchor point tab, and then sure enough, here we see our text. Now, as I roll over this text, you'll notice here in the UI that the anchored layer starts to highlight, just to let me know where it is in the layer stack. So I'll left click to establish this link. Now in my case here, it's asking me, okay, well, what reference channel do you want to work with? Because I could set this up to be any channel I want. In my case, I'm going to tell the system here, Painter, that I want it to be referencing that height data that I created. Now you can already start to see that we're getting this rust to start to appear or kind of flow around this height data that we just painted, which is pretty cool. Now, this is actually producing a mask for us, so we can use this level control to help try to control this effect. But if we scroll up here to this section here for our mgdirt, you'll see that we have this micro details. Now, almost all of our generators are going to have this micro detail section. Now here I had it enabled, so by default, of course, it's going to be off. So when you scroll up here, all you need to do is just enable this or turn this on. Now here you're going to have some controls here for like AO radius and depth. So what I'm going to do is just change this AO radius here. So it just kind of helps lessen that effect. I'll play around here with this depth control as well as this curve intensity. And so this kind of helps break up the effect just a little bit more like this. So here's what we can see with micro height disabled. This is what we have. So it looks, again, just like what's happening here is just we have some height information that's basically pasted over top of everything else. Our rust material is not being integrated with this new detail that we have. So now by using an anchor to anchor this height information that we've painted, we can use that anchor as part of a micro detail here inside of a generator. So here, again, I enable that micro height. Now, the dirt effect from our dirt generator is now also using this height information here from our text. So now that height data that we painted here is completely integrated. So now that this has been set up, we can go back to this layer here and just start to paint more details in. So for example, let's come over here to our alpha, and let me just do a quick search here for logo, and I'm going to use the Substance Painter logo here. So now we have Substance Painter logo. Let's come into this area. I'm just going to enlarge my brush size here, and then I'll just stamp this guy down. And because, again, our mask generator is referencing this anchored data, which is, again, this height data, the rust is generating here in all these occluded areas and things like that. So in this example, I showed just a basic use of how we can anchor some data and then use that inside of something like, say, a mask generator. However, it's not just about anchoring just data for use in a generator. You can actually set up an anchor in a reference system between layers here in the layer stack using this exact same protocol. Again, here, it's just a helpful way to link one piece of data in your layer stack to another.